Welcome back. South Africans have waited for almost 4 years for the final report on whether the state and its institutions were indeed captured. State Capture Inquiry Chairperson, Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, yesterday handed over the first part of the report to President Cyril Ramaphosa. Several entities and political bigwigs have been implicated in wrongdoing in the first draft of the report. For a discussion on this, I'm joined by Chief Executive Officer at Organization Undoing Tax Abuse, Wayne Duvenhage. Wayne, we do know that it is quite a thick report that has been handed over to President Cyril Ramaphosa. What have you been able to take out of it so far? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Well, firstly, it's a very damning report, and that now we no longer need to work on speculation, although we had a lot of evidence, civil society I'm talking about in general, and the media, on what was happening in the background. But here's a judicial inquiry and a commission that has now cemented and formalized the process of state capture with good findings, with good recommendations so far in part one. And we believe now there's no excuse. Action can start taking place. And the NPA and the various criminal justice system and agencies can start to hold people to account.
When we do know that this is, of course, the first part of 3 parts of the state of this report that will be handed over to the President, and the President has got until June to actually look through the recommendations made by the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. What are you, as OUTA, expecting to see come June, when the President is expected to make some kind of announcement?
Well, I don't even think we need to wait for that. The President himself has empowered and has various institutions and agencies that need to do the work. So that would be old hat when it comes around to June, and that's when Parliament is going to be instructed by the President to start acting. And I think that's where you might see the ethics commissions and committees, various committees, to start doing some of the oversight work in hindsight that they should have been doing a long time ago. But what we want to see now is the work that should have already started taking place while the commission was being run, because, the law did allow the commission, the national prosecuting authorities, the SIU and the Assets Forfeiture Unit and others, to start taking action while the commission was gathering evidence. But now it's all there. They have access to that information and more information, by the way, that has been provided by civil society and others. And we think what needs to happen between now and June, when the President does make his views felt or heard, that people should already be in the dock by then, be charged, and possibly even some of them on their way to jail.
When we do know how our legal system works, and the NPA has often been criticized when it comes to how slow they actually do their work sometimes. Do you foresee any of what you've just said actually taking place between now and June?
Well, we think that they have got some cases that are already quite far advanced. So, yes, we believe that not just because this report is out now and that they're going to start acting, but because they have been doing work, although very slowly, in the past, that we do anticipate some cases to come to the fore right now. But you're quite right. These institutions have been decimated during state capture. They've been hollowed out. They are short of capacity and skills. And we are hoping that from this report now, that the authorities will allocate more resources to the fight against corruption on the back of how voluminous and how much is contained in these reports, so that we can meaningfully tackle corruption in this country, and that we can set up new processes, additional processes, bring into place possible changes to legislation around fighting corruption, as has been recommended by the Zondo Commission, and really start to see meaningful and formidable holding to account of those who've transgressed the laws in this country.
And so with this report, we do know that it really does blow the lid off corruption around entities such as SAA, SA Express, and of course we also heard around issues with GCIS as well with this particular report. What more stands out for you, Wayne, when I just mentioned these kind of entities, and really what we heard during the proceedings of the State Capture Inquiry?
Yeah. Look, there's no doubt the report now just really gives clarity and through the judicial process and the analysis and the evaluations and the interviews that took place, it is now very clear how state capture was working, that it was a planned effort, and that there are many people involved. And for instance, take just Duvenhage, for instance, who was positioned as the chairperson at SAA, and what her role was there. I mean, we took her to court in a civil matter to have her declared a delinquent director. That was referred by Judge Tolmay to the NPA, and it was also reported on in the report. What we would like to see is that evidence being used to criminally charge her and others. So that's just one microcosm of what has happened. I think what's very clear coming out of the report as well is that when it comes to board appointments, we should not be allowing those in positions of authority within government to be the sole decision makers of the appointees of board members. We need to see civil society participating and having some say. We need to see a lot more oversight in this process so that we can have clean boards that are doing the work without interfering with the operations of these state-owned entities, because we've seen how these state-owned entities have been decimated. People have lost their jobs. We've lost a lot of foreign revenue and income to this country, and we really have a lot of work to do to now go and fix this country. But we're not going to do that unless we hold people to account and change the processes, bring civil society and better oversight into play going forward.
And this is something that ALTA has often been calling for, isn't it, Wayne, that civil society organizations are brought in to work with government on certain issues? I mean, the issue of the ministers appointing board members is something that has also been raised within this first part of the report.
Absolutely. And the lack of appointments of boards sometimes, where you have these voids for a long period of time. We've seen that in the Air Services Licensing Council recently, in the Department of Transport. It's a department within government, and so many other areas where there's just this lackadaisical approach to board appointments, and then you find the cronyism and the lack of skills and requirements. I mean, just take an airline, for instance, the complexities of running an airline, the competitiveness of that business, and you put somebody like Duvenhage in to chair it, is just mind-boggling, because she might have skills in other areas, but certainly not in the management or running or chairing of boards of airlines. And we find this across the board, right down into the seaters. It permeates the whole running of our country, quite frankly.
I mean, we've mentioned the names, the likes of the former President Jacob Zuma, Duvenhage. Which other names do you think will pop up then when we receive the second and third reports?
Well, we're also seeing, people implicated in Eskom, for instance, Brian Molefe, Anosh Singh. We have Colin Machila, who was also Eskom CEO at one time. And there are many others, Siyabonga Gama, Yaki Kwinana in this first part of the report needs to be held accountable as well. So the list is really long, but what we also need to bear in mind are the businesses and the companies, because it takes two to tango in this corruption space. And we have the likes of Bain. We have a lot of questions that are required. Even though the McKinseys of the world have paid back a lot of the money, we still want to see people held accountable. It's too easy to do wrong and just pay back the money and get off scot-free. We need to see directors of those companies also being held to account. Tom Moyane is a name that comes to the fore, and we certainly need to see him being held accountable for his role in state capture. And
the issue, of course, of the recommendations that will be made or have been made by the acting Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, who was the chairperson of this inquiry, you did mention that action needs to take place before June. Are we hopeful and confident that something like this could possibly happen? I mean, we've seen Duvenhage refusing at some point to be in court, or her, her court appearances being quite dramatic. We've seen the former president, Jacob Zuma, refusing to go to the state capture inquiry. So what do you think will possibly happen, Wayne? Just briefly for us.
Yes, so what happens in a court process, so you can try and ignore this process, but if a court orders Duvenhage or Jacob Zuma to come to court to answer questions, and they don't, then the judge is left with no option if he doesn't hear their side of the story, or she doesn't hear their side of the story, to make a judgment. And that judgment is final, and that judgment will obviously, maybe it gets appealed, but at some stage it has to be carried out. So they can't ignore this process when it comes to court charges that are brought by the National Prosecuting Authority. They will just land themselves in more hot water and be prosecuted and potentially sent to jail. And they can't ignore that either. So it'll be very interesting to see how they react to this. But we look forward to the work going forward. We do believe that work is going to flow for a long time now from this report.
Wayne Duvenhage there from Outer, thank you so much for your time speaking around the issue of the first part of the state capture inquiry being handed over to President Cyril Ramaphosa.